Welcome to the March 2022 crypto update. February was a shit show where so much was going on with the world. I definitely overweighed positive things in Bitcoin, was talking about shit shows in the US and Russia and didn't apply that to the market. And so I hope that as people are following me, they can see how I'm pointing out where I literally forget to cross-reference and compare what is the context of the world underneath the asset, because similar to how an altcoin is not worth looking at if Bitcoin is nuking, you know the altcoin will nuke. If the world is nuking, I don't really give a shit if there's a daily nice aspect for Bitcoin. If Russia's fucking invading Ukraine or warning about it and things like that, the market's gonna be shaky as hell. So I have a full video out on Russia and Ukraine, as well as my March video, because I do like March overall for most people, but for the market and for world events, it is shaky and there's a lot of back and forth. So we're gonna get into what exactly is happening in the US, the Russian charts, and then also crypto assets. So TLDR, I don't really see it as a big improvement or a big nuke. I do see middle of the month, definitely some difficulties, major, but we'll get into that. Just going to get into the general astrology first, because we start out with the 1st through the 6th looking like a mixture of aggressive actions and incredible idealism. With Venus, Mars, Pluto conjuncting Capricorn, that is aggressive and that's very, very threat-based. I think that everyone is on high defense militarily, US and Russia. And on the 2nd through the 4th, they're both exactly conjunct Pluto. So look to the 2nd through the 4th for actions that are very, very defense-oriented, especially with this being right on top of the United States as Pluto, as I'll get into. It looks like the United States is on the defense and on the taking preventative measures. On the 2nd, the new moon in Pisces is really idealistic. So for an individual level, it's really beautiful. Our dreams, everything is highlighted. We see the end goals. There's serious actions that we're taking towards them with the Capricorn and Aquarius placements. But for a nationalistic or military sense, I would argue that it screams like thinking that you're in the right and that it looks very much like putting yourself or your team on a pedestal. So I caution towards the fallout, even though the new moon on the 2nd for individuals is really lovely for the most part. On the 2nd, there's also Mercury and Saturn in Aquarius. This is very serious, very cut and dry communication. That is like, we're doing this for the future and there's no ifs, ands, or buts. On the 4th through the 6th, the sun will also conjoin Jupiter in Pisces exactly. So look towards putting leaders on a pedestal or being very idealistic towards those in power. A little bit further in the 2nd week of March, overall, there's a lot of moving forward and what we started early on in the month taking fruition. So on the 6th, when Venus and Mars enter Aquarius, we're acting upon what we promised a few days earlier in the same kind of architecting, planning area of life. And on the 12th, with the sun conjunct Neptune, huge trust and idealism placed in leaders. We are looking up to leaders to a huge degree that may be a little bit unhealthy. There's a lot moving forward. Like I said, all planets are direct. And then on the 18th, the full moon in Virgo, and with Venus and Mars in Aquarius squaring Uranus and Taurus, we see details and we're letting the details of our plan be known, and they're extremely disruptive, but we're willing to take action for follow through. So this is where values are tested, and each side, like Russia, Ukraine, US, things are clear about where we stand and we're being nitpicky about the actions of others. On the 20th, the sun enters Aries, and the 28th to 29th, Venus is conjunct Saturn in Aquarius, which is very serious, and it's also impulsive, so we're moving forward with very serious conviction to have a reality check around our commitments and what we really are initiating. So beginning of the month is a lot of declarations around what are our ideals and our plan to execute. Middle of the month is like nitpicky, like nanny boo-boo, you did this, I'm going to follow through and nail you harder. End of the month is continuing forward with our commitments and seeing the larger vision. For the United States' chart, pretty much Jesus Christ is what I would say. On the 2nd and 3rd, Venus, Mars, Pluto on its natal Pluto with the Pluto return there. Actions that directly involve the United States Pluto return will be clear. Like, look towards the financial or military-based actions, because with the 2nd house being values, both defense financially and defense militarily go into kind of the same, like I would argue the 2nd house has military connections as well, and that makes a lot of sense to be reinforced right now. So on the 2nd and 3rd, look towards actions and decisions that are highlighting and catalyzing the U.S. Pluto return and hurt us financially and destabilize us further, especially with natural resources and in relation to Russia, I would say. On the 8th, Mercury is conjunct the United States' moon, so I would look towards announcements about money, announcements about the economy. And on the 12th, the sun is opposite the United States' natal Neptune. Biden is confused. Biden is not making sense. On the 15th, with Mercury squaring the United States' Uranus, and this also leading into the full moon, I would expect pretty shocking news around defense again, because the 4th house is involved. So yeah, shocking news around the 15th. And then onward, it kind of continues. So Venus trining the United States as Uranus helps this news be well received. The 21st, with the Sun conjunct the United States as IC, representing homeland. And on the 23rd, with Mercury opposing the United States as Neptune, we're doing things that seem to be in a defensive mode, but they're not making a total amount of sense. Weird-ass news and confusion from Biden is what I would say. But as for Putin, which is the really major thing that I am looking at because his chart stands out so much to me, middle of March for Putin. Saturn is going to be crossing his IC and his North Node. So Saturn represents ingraining, commitments, seriousness, very much committing to actions that are conservative or defense-oriented in nature. It represents a boundary. And the North Node represents increase in someone's chart to defend something or go towards it. The IC is literally homeland or like nation in a politician's chart more so than family or home, like decoratively in a normal person's chart, I would say. So Saturn there, and then Venus and Mars will cross later on in the month. Looks like Putin is committing to his actions middle of the month around the 17th. So look to the full moon in Virgo for alliances that he's committing to for defense. I think this could involve the 2 states in Ukraine that he considered autonomous and recognized. It could bring in even larger world powers, given that the full moon will be in his 11th house of allies. So I'm not sure who's directly an ally to Russia. I don't have that knowledge, but I would look towards announcements of allies that drive towards more commitment. For Bitcoin, I do really love that the new moon on the 2nd is sextile Bitcoin's sun. That's a good pump into. But it's interesting that Pisces as a sign has been kind of bad for the market. I think that I'm now seeing that we might get some relief leading into the new moon, but planets in Pisces are great for us to have fun, us to, like, not me, because I don't really do this, but like drink, party, do drugs. But for the markets, there's not enough structure and stability for investor conviction. So Pisces is not generally the best for the market, I'm finding. In fact, it's generally bad. So I don't see this month as being a month of wide-scale improvement. I see it being a month of fake out and confusing price action, given that there's Jupiter, there's Neptune, which they blur boundaries. So on the 4th, we have Mercury conjunct Bitcoin's Neptune. We have Mars and Venus conjoining Bitcoin's Jupiter on the 5th. So actually, I think the 4th and the 5th could have some dreamy news that leads to a little bit of a pump, but it's not super promising. On the 9th, we have Venus conjunct Bitcoin's Mercury, and we have the Sun conjunct Bitcoin's Uranus, which I think the 4th through the 9th will have some uplifting, optimistic, bullish news that leads to like sudden conviction or a sudden use case, but I don't think that it overrides like just turbulence in the overall world right now. Like there's more important things than Bitcoin for most investors currently. Early month, I think it's trying to recover and doesn't really work out. So with Mars conjoining Bitcoin's Mercury on the 9th and Mercury conjoining Bitcoin's Venus on the 10th, there's a lot of back and forth, almost like partisan news or back and forth takes around Bitcoin and its use case that are just annoying and very confusing to people. Like there's a lot of back and forth on the narrative. On the 12th, the Sun is opposite Bitcoin's Saturn, which is a little bit problematic. And on the 18th, the full moon in Virgo is very close to Bitcoin's natal Saturn, and it is also trining Bitcoin's Jupiter, which looks like we might go down to hit a very heavy support level, but stay. I would describe it as that. That Saturn means usually bearish, but also support. So hitting support. So yeah. I tried to explain that as clearly as I could because that one seems pretty clear. So yeah, difficult leading into the full moon as usual. On the 21st then, Mercury is conjoining Bitcoin's Uranus, which looks like startling news on the 21st. Also, the Sun is squaring Bitcoin's Pluto that day. That's provocative. And Mercury is opposing Bitcoin's Saturn. Again, these narratives where there's opposing narratives is how I would define this. Like bulls and bears are fighting, basically. If you're trading this like I would be scalping. Not financial advice, but I'm not looking to take any set longs or shorts because I think that probably up until the new moon on the 2nd, and then we have down gnarly until the full moon on the 18th, still kind of gnarly, because on the 29th and 30th, with Mercury conjunct Bitcoin's moon and Mercury square Bitcoin's Mars, it's just like we get some good news, but like bam, market doesn't really respond. So intraday, you might catch some pumps, especially on like the recovery leading into the new moon, and then the 4th through the 9th might be a little bit better, but nothing to where I'm confident telling you like this is the month that we're recovering. I think that looks a little bit better later in spring. For ETH, it's very, very similar. In fact, there's less astrology for ETH. So for Ethereum and Ether, Mercury is opposing its natal Jupiter on the 8th and squaring its natal Saturn. So again, conflicting. Opposing Jupiter, bullish, squaring Saturn, bearish. Opposite ETH Venus is bullish, but this is in the same time frame as the confusing but possibly bullish news for Bitcoin. So I'd look towards a fake, like a scam pump in the first to second week of, around the 4th to the 9th. That's what I would categorize that. On the 13th, we have Venus opposing Ethereum Sun, Mercury conjunct ETH Neptune, so 13th is a little bit better. 15th, though, looks kind of gnarly again. Mars opposing ETH Sun. 21st has Venus opposing ETH Mercury and Mars opposing ETH Mercury right after. So the news aspect of this, with so much Mercury going on, looks gnarly in my opinion. I'm not overly optimistic. In fact, I think a lot of people are going to get burned. So looking at ETH here, for example, we are near pretty strong support, I would argue. As you know, I keep things simple. This knocks out. Next place I'm looking to short to would be here. This bounce here is around 2,400. This is around 2,100. So pretty simple. And then there's really strong around 1,730. So let me just move these down because like 1,730 is possible. Like this is definitely possible. As with Bitcoin, let me draw some lines here. It's fairly simple what I'm doing here. Where we are here, there's fairly strong support. You just draw your lines. Like it's that simple, but execution obviously is a little bit harder. I would be drawing 3 lines here for my short plan or long plan. You know, my long plan would be 46K. I would cut it at 45. Say we might bounce here. There's some resistance here. Like this is gnarly, and then via reversal up. That's a possible path, for example. So I am not looking to try and predict definite paths because this is so conflicting and has so much back and forth. For example, I would not have predicted this. Like I just